welcome back. In this video I'm going to be covering my camp setup for Washington. So this is my army setup after Hardin Pike. Haven't changed anything yet. So the main things I'm going to do to get this cleaned up is I'm going to pull apart this artillery corps and set all my units up into a basic pattern of more or less 14 infantry brigades, 2 skirmishers, 6 artillery, and 2 cavalry as sort of a generic all-purpose setup, and then I'll move some stuff around later on. So that setup is going to look like this. So here you can see that I have shifted a bunch of units around. I've vaguely tried to get the units which were in one specific corps back into that same corps. I've also topped off most of all the snipers back up to 375, and I've restored the missing men and all the artillery units. But other than that, I haven't added any men at this point. It looks like I also, so I think I also sold off most of the weapons at this point. So you can see I have a lot of money available. I sold off, let's see, all the 6-pounders, the yards. I just don't have enough of them to justify a slot for them. They were useful when I had them, but I maybe could have gotten rid of them earlier. But all the 12-pounders, the Napoleons, the 10-pounders, or I guess I still have the 10-pounders. I think I end up selling those off a little bit later, and I'll sell off more. But this gives me a good money amount to start upping my infantry sizes. Let's see, I think I also sold off everything other than a few of the melee weapons that I'm going to be using for the cavalry and the Spencers, and then sold off almost everything except for the scoped rifles. And haven't done that yet. Okay. So you can see the basic setup. We still have officers to replace and all that, but we're in pretty good shape. We basically have almost 4 corps worth, and then we have some extra stuff at the end that we're going to need to fill out. So this is my setup with the generic corps order and all of these units put up to 1800. So what I did to get to this, it sort of runs counter to how I played the rest of the campaign, because we had a whole lot of money and we didn't have any need for it after this battle, so we might as well use all of it. So I invested in a lot of veterans. Honestly, the fact that I had so much money sitting around, I think I went through around 1.2, 1.3 million total. Really means that I probably should have been spending more of that earlier on. I should have either made units larger, going into Cold Harbor or something like that, or just sort of should have spent more on veterans, because I just ended up with so much money at the end that it probably would have been more worthwhile to have like higher veterancy units earlier than just taking, lower levels and just dumping a bunch of veterans into them now. So what I did is, for all my infantry units, I put them up to 1650 with veterans, regardless of how much that cost. I think there were 1 or 2 units that were sort of on the edge of losing a star when I put rookies into 1800. So in those cases, I put in a few thousand extra just to make sure I kept that. I played to arrive at that 1650 number. I redid this entire process several times. I initially went all the way to 1800 on 2 corps, and then did 1600 on these 2, and then did a corps of 2500 man musket units. But I didn't really like how that turned out. Took more casualties than I really wanted to, and units were smaller than I wanted them on the second day. So I went to 1800 with everything. And that worked out pretty well in terms of the rifles I had. So what I have left over is just about 1,000 or a little bit more in a few cases where I just don't, there's no way to split this into an extra unit and have anything left over to restore units on the second day. So I left about 1,000 of the 4 primary weapons that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to have, this isn't quite filled out, so I'm going to end up with a few thousand to restock on day 2 for any unit that takes particularly heavy casualties. But to go back to this, so we went up to 1650 and then up to 1800. All of the cannons that I had enough types for, I put up to 14, which is if you were playing the base game, would be the absolute maximum amount of damage you can get out of an artillery unit. A lot of the 20 pounders and stuff are smaller just because I don't have enough to send that up any higher. Put the cav up to 500. I think this was actually I think the cav was mostly rookies. I just don't, they're almost 100 melee anyways. They don't need more. They'll be good enough for what they're doing. In terms of rifles, so what I mostly tried to do is around like 62 to 65 or higher. I gave them the 1863s and branded them as sort of the elite rifle unit. Anything under 60 gets a Harper's Ferry or an Enfield. In my opinion, those weapons are somewhat interchangeable. So, they have their slight advantages in one area or another, but for an infantry unit, they functionally serve the same purpose. So we'll have a mixture of those. If you're from like 60 to 62 or so, then I put the 1861s in there. And then anything with a Richmond, since they have the higher melee value, I put the M rifle designation in there. It's not going to change a whole lot of how I play, but it's just useful to sort of know what those units are set up for. Oh, here's another unit. I don't think I've quite filled out. I'm going to have one more save to transition to, and I think I fill out the artillery at that point. But you can see at this point we're bringing about 26,000 infantry, about 2,000 artillery, and about 1,000 cavalry per corps. And you can see these are almost, so these are all 2-star, mostly 3-star artillery. Starting, I think, the next corps we start to get into a few units that are 2 stars, but we still for the artillery, but we still have 2 stars for all the infantry. And then back here we finally get into still a good chunk of 2 stars, but we start getting into our 1-star infantry, which is, some of these were a lot of my musket units that I have converted, so they have pretty low firearms values, but I have the extra rifles, and I tend to prefer to use these units as rifle units as opposed to melee units. So wouldn't have had enough muskets to really equip them anyways. So they'll do their job, even though this is a bit low. But one thing, we're actually going to be going in with experienced trainers on basically everything. Even though we aren't taking these units out of this battle, you still gain experience on the first day, and you can get quite a lot of it. So like these units are gonna, this stat's probably going to be up in like the 50s or 60s by the end of the first day. You can also see I've run out of 20 pounders, so I've got some 10 pounders and stuff in here. We've got a couple of new, brand new sniper units. They aren't going to do great, but there's a lot of cases in this battle where you really want to be able to hit something out of range, and so these will prove useful. And then our last corps, which isn't completely set up yet, but we've got that leftover artillery, a couple of 12 pounders, or 24 pounders, and then these are all pure rookie brigades, well, except this guy. I think we had one, and then everything else. So this is my final setup. This is what I'm going to be taking in. So I've shifted around a few of these units. There's a lot of fort storming you have to do on day 1, and I want some more of these rookie musket units to be on the field in time to participate in that. I'd rather do that than use these more experienced units. I want to save those units for day 2, where I'm going to be sitting in fortifications, and then that's when these units are really going to be useful. So I've swapped some of those around, but you can see I'm still using the base, pretty much the generic template for this corps. Going to be going in with the 2 cavalry units, 2 sniper units, the 6 artillery. I split the artillery evenly between 24 pounders and some sort of counter battery. And the reason I keep it split up this way is because the units come in by division. I want to have a mixture of stuff coming in. In terms of pure control, it would actually be nice to have, say, like an entire division of musket units or an entire division of long-range counter battery, because then you can just select the division control and issue them all the same order and keep it. It makes controlling very large armies a little bit easier. It's not something I'm too concerned about earlier in the campaign, but for a battle this size, it actually would be quite helpful. Since I don't do that for other reasons, I end up having to pause a lot to try and sort stuff out towards the end of the battle. So this is probably my best corps. I guess I have some artillery swapped around as well. Like this is going to get swapped out for later days and stuff. But the 10 pounders come in a little late, so that's fine. Standard general setup we've had: trainer, infantry, cover perk. I pulled a different corps commander here because what I wanted to have is the leader perk, which gives you less morale damage received. I basically don't care about that stat in any battle in the game except for this one. In this one, on the second day, or when you're storming those forts, you're just going to take so much damage from the enemy artillery that it's really important to, like, that. Those morale reductions really help keep men on the walls. So I'm going to actually bring 2 of these guys in. So the 2 hardest forts to defend are going to have the 2 generals double stacked on top of them, so that they both have higher cover, better melee, and actually the cover probably doesn't do a whole lot except for anything that isn't in fortifications, but they're going to have the morale reduction, which is going to be very helpful. So this is another basic setup. We have a little extra artillery in here. I want the snipers in this corps are actually sitting in my second corps because they're going to come in first. On the first day, these 2 corps are going to be coming in sort of as the reinforcement to the main attack. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that's this corps. So this is another one with cover perk. Same basic setup. This is our 6th sniper unit that we didn't quite manage to get to 3 stars, but still do alright. So this corps is going to be the one that actually attacks first. The reason I have artillery stacked up here is because I don't have major generals in command of the rest of these divisions, and so this keeps the command as high as I can get it, more or less. So I've got a little bit of extra artillery, I've got some musket units and stuff in here, and I've got 2 Spencer carbine units, which are going to take a lot of losses because there's a few different tasks I have for them. They'll be useful, and actually my goal is to kill one of these off because I have filled out this corps completely, and I wouldn't have space to swap units on day 2 if I didn't kill them off. So I wanted to bring in as many brigades as possible, and to do that and still be able to move units around on day 2, I have to get someone killed. So bad luck for them, but. So this unit, or this corps, is mostly, is eventually going to be mostly musket units. The last division that I filled out was almost all 10-pounder Parrott counter battery. They're not going to do a whole lot, but the more you can get on the field on that last day to get rid of the Union artillery, the better off you're going to be. There's just so much of it that it takes forever to get rid of, and it is really dangerous. We've also got a couple of extra sniper units. They're probably going to get ground down, and again, aren't going to do a whole lot, but there's just the battle's so big that there's plenty of space for flanking, so it's always useful to have more of these. And if you can get them, once you can get them into the enemy artillery, then you've basically wrapped up the battle at that point. Got a couple of small 24-pounder units. I didn't have quite enough to use them all up. or to get them up to 14. So in terms of reputation, I spent the 35 on the 8,000 men, and then I spent, I think it was 20 for the 4,000 Richmonds. If I had any more, I would take the howitzers, but ran out. There's also an argument to be made that you want to stop purchasing most of this stuff prior to this battle. So when I was coming into this, I think I had 78, 79. I had plus 10 morale, which in most battles don't care about it at all. But in this specific case, where you're filling a lot of these rookie brigades, instead of having 28 morale, we'd be at 38, which really can start to add up. And if you go all the way to 100, I think you get plus 15. So that morale bonus can actually be very useful, especially if you're going more melee heavy. But in my case, I really wanted that extra men, and once I took the extra men, I only had a bonus of plus 2. So that I figured that doesn't do me any good. I'd rather have the extra Richmonds. It helps me fill out the rest of the army. Because as you'll be able to see, I bought out basically almost all the Richmonds. The reason I can buy 1861s is I actually sold some of them back. I sort of ran out of money. I wanted to have around 200,000, 180,000 or so to refill supply on day 2 and to buy back some veterans and officers and that sort of thing. And I didn't have quite enough by the time I'd done everything, and I didn't want to sell off any more of the rest of this. I have more rifles than I can possibly equip, but I figured I didn't know which units were going to take the casualties, so I was going to be a little higher on each of them rather than going in and discovering I didn't have enough. So I sold back a few of those. Otherwise, I bought out everything newer. I didn't quite buy out the farmers. I debated buying the reboards, but it turned out I didn't need them. I had enough other rifles that I didn't use them. Otherwise, if I'd run out of these and these, then I would have gone to the reboards next for a melee weapon. Not enough palmettos left to buy, but in terms of skirmishers, we have a few sniper weapons left and a few Spencers left. Everything else got sold. I sold some of these, just have a little bit extra to refill a cav unit a little bit on day 2. I'm not sure if I actually will. Depends on how much money I have and what units take the casualties. And then sold off any cannon I couldn't field. I guess it's worth mentioning, could have theoretically brought in the Whitworth. I just don't think the damage is high enough. You know, you compare the low, like even with the range and the good damage multiplier, you compare that to the damage range of the 10-pounder Parrot, and especially when I can bring 14 of these as opposed to 8, I can't justify wasting a unit slot on this. So this was probably a wasted rep purchase. I think I used it in like 2 battles total, and not really worthwhile, but worth experimenting with. And if you like it more, if you don't like that, if you just like to be able to leave them there and not have to micromanage it at all, it won't be terribly effective, but if that's something you like to do, go for it. Okay, so we have a little bit left over here. We have this for day 2. Alright, I think that's everything I want to cover for camp. After the battle, I will have a separate video where I sort of go look through unit history and stuff, but I didn't want to drag this out any longer, so I'll do that separately. So I will be back with day 1, and we'll see how this goes. Thanks for watching.